There was a big spike at the start. It was relatively slow in the middle. But then at the end, it just went absolutely crazy. And so we're actually going to come in, we believe, at about £55,000 for us. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Confessions of a B2B Marketer podcast. And this one is a massive one. We're going to dig into what really is going on with the businesses that we're running, what the challenges are, and what the next kind of 8 months holds for these businesses. Because as this episode is titled, The Big Race, we're basically in a race against our bank account to see if we can make our SaaS business Bcast work. So that's what we're going to be discussing, along with a little bit about our other business, which is essentially the same, but just a service, not the software. It's called Fame. It's a podcast marketing agency. So before we get into that, I do want to quickly share a shout out to another reviewer of this podcast. This is L Ship It. I believe it's Luke Shipley, who's the founder of Zinc.work, which is a SaaS company in the HR space. He says, Tom, I love the transparency. Tom's clearly experiencing the same things as me as an entrepreneur. Thank you so much, Luke Shipley. Right. So in order for this episode to really make sense to you, you need a little bit of context. If you are a long-time subscriber to this podcast, this might be a little bit boring, so I'll keep it to 30 seconds. But the story starts where I create the blog SaaS Marketer. You might be on the SaaS Marketer blog now listening to this. Built an audience of SaaS marketers and founders. And then from there, built an agency where we provide a podcast growth service for B2B businesses, and obviously was able to sell that service to the audience. Then at the same time, I met someone in the audience, and then we started building a piece of software that enables that process. It's called Bcast. It's podcast hosting for marketers and by marketers. So if you think about it, there are three kind of individual things. There's the audience of SaaS Marketer, there is the agency called Fame, and there's the software called Bcast. And so that's the backdrop. Now, I have been spending more of my time on the agency and on Bcast over the last few months because those are the two that are growing revenue-wise. So first, I'm going to start with Fame, and then we're going to move on to Bcast. And the name of The Big Race will make much more sense to you as we go through the episode. And also, I'm going to share our numbers from September. So Fame. First thing you need to do is go to fame.so. So it's fame.so. That is our new agency site. We've been running this agency for approximately a year, and we never had a website. As of August, we had 9 clients. That number went down to 8. So we lost, somebody churned. The reason being, I signed an unrealistic agreement that actually incentivized the client to churn. And maybe we didn't perform that well because at the time we were onboarding them was the time where I was also traveling around Europe. And we also were launching Bcast on AppSumo, so I was very stretched for time. So completely fair enough. We're still kind of doing a little bit of work for them over the next few months, but they are essentially churning. So there's 9 down to 8, which isn't great news. But actually, I think our churn stats are pretty good. Since the start of the agency, we've had 10 clients, only 2 have churned. 1 has come back saying that they may want to start again. So I'm kind of happy with the churn numbers. So in September, our monthly revenue with those 8 clients, it was about 13K, but then it went down to 11K as we lost that client. So it's about 11K pounds or 14K per month in revenue. So pretty happy with that, but obviously want to grow this thing and believe the thing can grow. So I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on what is the name of the agency, what is the brand of the agency, what do we stand for, what is our vision, and that has manifested itself in the fame.so site that I'm really happy with. Shout out to Florin, who is our designer, who has designed that, and I'm really, really enjoying that. The brand, and I think there's a lot of potential here in the agency, particularly because there's some pretty crazy results. There's one client, maybe I actually can't say their name because I haven't asked them if I can share this, but we launched a podcast very recently. You can actually find them on our site. I won't say which one. We launched a podcast very recently in July, August, and we have this brand in the specific niche that they're in. We're getting good guests. The content is great. The host is amazing. But then also one of those guests, actually, one of the early guests, came to that business and said, actually, thanks, really enjoyed the episode, love the content. Can you talk to me about your service and your software? And so I think that deal is going to close, which is, I believe, going to get them a significant return on everything they spent with us so far. And so that just wipes out the cost of the podcast. And so all of that SEO, all of the brand benefits and the social benefits they're getting are going to come for free. So pretty happy with that. And that's why I'm very bullish on this agency. And so for the last month or so, I've been focused back on the client acquisition side. And so what's great about having a separate audience, both now with Bcast and SaaS Marketer, is that you do have people that you can reach out to potentially bring into the sales funnel. So I've generated a few leads from that. And if you are a business, service, or SaaS and are considering podcasts, we have a very low, I believe, monthly subscription for us to build and grow the podcast for you. So just hit me up. tom@tomhutton.io is my email address. So that's the first area where we can generate leads. The second is I hired a sales guy. Now, the sales guy is called Kay. He's an absolute legend. He's based in Thailand. I'm going to insert a clip here.
Hey, my name is Kay. I do sales for Fame, and I'm a closer.
And so Kay and I have been working on defining which we believe is to be the best B2B niche in order for us to target. And then Kay is going cold. He's phoning cold and then booking podcast strategy sessions where I'll just jump on the call with the founder or the marketer from the business and talk about podcasts, give them a strategy. And then if they want us to implement that, then that's fine. So that's working. We've had a few sales calls. We haven't closed a deal yet, but I'm hopeful for that. Next, I have a secret strategy that I can't mention yet. I don't know why I wrote this in the notes because I can't say anything. Maybe I will at some point in the future. And basically the goal is to add one client per month up to the end of this year. So that'll be December 2020. And then next year, I'd like to add 2 clients per month and ideally get to around 34 or 35 by the end of December 2021. So I do need to get this client acquisition system rolling. And I probably will need to step back from part of that process at some point next year. Right now, I will be doing all the sales calls after that first cold call from Kay, but I may have to hand that over, obviously, because there'll be a lot of challenges on delivery when we get to the 34 clients. So that's Fame. Again, very bullish due to the results that we're seeing. Love the new brand. Pretty excited about how and where that's going to grow over the next 18 months. Now, let's move on to Bcast, and let me give you some numbers first. So the AppSumo launch was really good. It was relatively slow. There was a big spike at the start. It was relatively slow in the middle. But then at the end, it just went absolutely crazy. And so we're actually going to come in, we believe, at about £55,000 for us. And it's about, right now, we're seeing close to 1,000 users, though we have sold about 2,300 codes. And obviously, one user can have multiple codes. So actually really happy with how that finished off. And that's a chunk of cash that we can then use to reinvest back into the product. Now, that 1,000 customers means we have approximately 500 podcasts live now, which is really good. It's really great to think that we have 500 different podcasts running on our software. It's an amazing feeling. And so the challenge now going forward is going to be, how can we take that lump sum of cash and then ideally without raising money, start growing the business sustainably, so that we can just start this kind of long-term growth of MRR. Right now, MRR is between £200 and £300. And so we essentially are going to burn down that cash over the next 12 months, and ideally will bring up the recurring revenue to cover our costs. And so I'm basically forecasting that by the end of next year, we're looking to be at about £7,000 in monthly recurring. And that is also the point in which this cash will run out, because we're going to be hiring our first developer right now. We're going to be investing money on ads. We obviously have support costs. We have SaaS costs, and then we also have server costs, which are quite significant, especially when you're paying for bandwidth for people's podcasts. Now, the good thing is that our SEO, Google is basically seeing all of this action, all of this traffic, all of the backlinks on our domain, because we create a podcast website for each person that comes and hosts. And our Google kind of ranking, our domain ranking on Ahrefs is literally going through the roof. Our referring domains is going through the roof. The keywords we're ranking for is also going through the roof. So that is great news. I've also been pumping some content out on the blog, not like amazing SaaS marketer style case studies, but some pretty good actionable podcast content. So that kind of flywheel, the social SEO content flywheel, is starting, but I don't know if that is the thing that's going to take us to 7K per month in recurring over the next 14 months. And so the question here is, what are the channels that are going to take Bcast to that level, that are going to allow us to generate enough cash to keep the business running sustainably? And there's actually 2 strategies that I'm going to test, and you're going to learn about how they test them live through this podcast, that are kind of a little bit unheard of in the SaaS world. The first of which is using Facebook ads to sell a lifetime access to the software, a limited lifetime access to the software for $69. Now, this is a strategy used by a company called Videos that I wrote a case study about. If you Google Videos case study, you'll find the article. And it's a super interesting strategy because instead of just bringing people on to pay a $30 per month monthly subscription, you can use paid traffic to sell a limited access to the product for, let's say, $69. And then there'll be upsells throughout that process. So maybe after you sold the $69, there might be another upsell right there and then in order to break even on the ad spend. But then in the app, there'll be a recurring upsell. This is what Videos do. I think it costs $69 to get access to their video editing software. And then you can unlock other templates, and new templates are released every month for a $37 per month subscription. And so that's something that no one else in the podcast hosting space is doing that I would like to test. Now, the chances of it working are probably like 10%, or it's going to take a lot of budget and a lot of time to get working. But if it does, the results are obviously very compelling because we should be able to break even on the front end with the ad spend, with the upsells, and then that's a very nice way of finding that recurring revenue. So I'll test that and you guys will find out. The second strategy I want to work on is, again, selling a limited lifetime access, but with partners that already have an audience that like and trust them. So here's a typical JV or affiliate model. Now, the challenge here is that getting people with big email lists to come and promote you is hard because obviously everybody wants that to happen. So the question is, how can you build the relationships with these people in order to convince them to promote you? And normally you have to promote them back as well. Unfortunately, we have an audience that we can use to promote stuff. And so what you're actually going to experience live is I'm going to be going out, reaching out to these people that do have audiences, inviting them onto this very podcast to kind of talk to them, expose them to our audience or to this audience. And then ideally, those relationships will result in some partner promos. And so if we go back to Fame and the agency, the way we're different from any other podcast agencies, we focus heavily on ROI, but not just through the listeners, but also through the guests. So every guest you bring onto the podcast needs to have, or ideally has an audience that they can promote to, can help create great content for the audience, for your audience. Also could be a customer maybe, or also could be a partner. So here it's that last one. I'm going to bring on people I think could be great partners, build those relationships, and ideally get them promoting that kind of one offer of Bcast, and then we'll have that recurring subscription on the back end. So those are the two strategies I'm going to test with Bcast. Again, we have maybe 12 months to actually get them working. And if they don't work, then who knows what's going to happen. These are basically my challenges. The agency growth, how we're going to bring in the clients, and then also deal with the operations when we get them, which I'm very confident that we're going to do. And then also that we have this lump of cash for Bcast without giving up any equity, right? And we also have 1,000 users of Bcast that are ideally going to be spreading the word because they think it's so great. But that cash is obviously going to run out as we reinvest back into the product. And so these are challenges. I thought I'd share them with you on this very podcast. If you have any thoughts, any feedback, if you know a business that you think would be great for the agency, or if you were going to run a podcast yourself, then I highly recommend obviously using Fame or Bcast. Just hit me up on email, tom@tomhunt.io, and I'm happy to jump on a call with you if you're a podcast listener anyway. And so, again, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate all the comments and feedback I get about the podcast. If you do leave a review anywhere on the internet, ideally Apple, just ping me a link to that review or ping me a screenshot of that review and I'll get it read out on this show. And I'll also give you and your business a shout out. And with that, thank you so much for listening.